Play, Watch, Listen is a mostly video game podcast made by game developers. It's brought to you by our supporters on Patreon who got this episode early and with an extra 15 minutes worth of content. But whether you support the show on Patreon or not, we hope you enjoy the episode and wish you a happy new year.
Where were you on January 6th?
I'll tell you where I wasn't, Alanah.
Not that it matters, to be fair.
You know, have I told you where I was on January 6th of 2021?
No, go on.
I was in Nashville recording Alien Fireteam Elite, and I had my phone on airplane mode the entire day because we were recording, and it was a very busy, very kind of tight schedule. So I had my phone as kind of like a timekeeper, basically, and I didn't turn it off airplane mode until about 9 o'clock that night. And so the whole thing was over and done with by the time I knew it existed. And it was very strange.
Otherwise,
because
you would have been there. If I
yeah,
had known.
He would have been there immediately. Weird coincidence. I was listening to that soundtrack earlier today, Austin. I was listening to that earlier while I was working.
Self-flagellating?
Yeah, no, just to like, just to show me what the low bar is, and
just
I try and
fill with rage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
I finally played all of Dispatch in 2 days.
Austin did too. You both played the whole thing. Look at you go. Thank you.
It's that kind of game.
Very bingeable. Obviously, I can take no credit.
We really got to fix this blur.
It's a nightmare, man.
It's like you're in the shower and we're just politely kind of trying to not look directly through the blurry shower.
I'm still looking at him every time, though. Right? There he is.
There you go. It's all good.
Yes, I also finished it, not in 2 days, but probably in 5. I think I did a slightly more than one episode per day average, basically.
I wasn't allowed to switch it off. Carrie loved it. It just became like she was like, just keep playing it. She was just watching it basically as a TV show.
I'm hoping when I go home, I can
criticizing a choice I made. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hoping when I go home, I can play it in front of my parents because it's such an easy game for other people to watch with you. I guess.
100%.
TV show.
Yeah. Well, because it's to quality than most animated TV shows. There, I said it. There's definite comparisons to other superhero animations that I think it blows out the water, frankly, visually.
Yeah, the animation, because obviously when we were recording VO, we would occasionally see like some previs stuff or some things that had like very early animation. The first time that I saw actual animation, I was like, oh, wow, because we'd been shown concept art of our characters, but we didn't really know what the game was going to look like. I think the animation's fantastic. That's done by a studio in Thailand, who Ad Hoc was saying that they tried pretty hard to find the right studio. It took them a while. Sorry, I have something in my eye. Happens. Happy Thanksgiving. But yeah, they it's gorgeous. The game's really good. I keep saying that I knew very early that they were making something that people were really going to like, but I didn't have any idea that people would like it this much. I've never worked on something that has instantly spawned a fandom before.
I mean, this is going to be like there are going to be cosplayers at the next like game events of those characters.
There already are, Mike.
Kind of
that people, the best thing about it, every time someone sees a Malevola cosplay, there are so many already, they send them to me. So people are just sending me pictures of hot girls all day. And I don't even have to do anything.
Devil ladies.
They're all hot.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and it's just
hot, like barbarian demon girls.
What could go wrong? So I'm just getting all these free pics of hot girls and the best part
acting.
exactly for the free hot chicks. The best part is if I interact with those hot chicks, they're all like, oh my god, so happy to see you. And none of them are like, why do you keep commenting on my posts? Go away. And it's been really great for me.
I imagine you have that problem otherwise.
Yeah, that notoriously happens to me a lot.
I must say, it's interesting. I caught wind of that a bit from your, Instagram and stuff. And I expected, a more kind of diffuse role of all these other characters. In other words, I expected your character to be a bigger character, like in terms of a kind of leaning into the telltale notion that you can kind of you can kind of prop up people more. It would give you more latitude to kind of focus on them. It's an impressive feat when someone can have. It's kind of like the Christoph Waltz thing, where someone can be in the story or in the on screen for a comparatively little amount of time and make still a pretty significant impression on character. I feel like pretty much the whole supporting cast benefited from that phenomenon in a fascinating way I wouldn't have expected, because it's way more focused on the main character, on Laura's character.
So that I don't think it has anything to do with me. I think she was going to be popular no matter what because of the way she looked. But I do think that they,
they're fun writing too. Like it's when you're in. You know what I mean? It's not just kind of like a lot of them are more than just props. They actually have kind of personality. You know what I mean? So even if they have one line in a given day, it's kind of like, oh, that's what they would say, though.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job about focusing on their relationships, which is obviously something that matters, but I think something that is often forgotten about, like, every single character should have feelings about some other character. We definitely were super thorough about that kind of thing at Sony. But I also, like, even playing it, it's generally harder to sell me on something that I've worked on. I'm going to be way more negative about it. And I have like affection for the Z team now. I'm like, oh, this little ragtag group of idiots whom I love. I'd have to sit down and think about how they specifically did that in terms of like commanding your affection.
The writing of it, like, I think obviously it goes without saying the performances are excellent. There was one actor I didn't think was quite pulling her weight, but the rest of them were all fantastic.
That's fair enough. Laura Bailey.
But yeah, 100%. No, from like a writing perspective, like, I think it is that specificity. I think it's something I turned to Kerry multiple times as we were playing. I was like, I can't remember the last time I played a game where the characters felt this specifically rendered as character, just from a writing point of view, like just in terms of the nuances of those characters and the way it encouraged me to use that knowledge of the characters to read into things and to kind of read between the lines of them. I genuinely, it's one I'm going to go back and study. I want to kind of look at, because I just think the writing on it I genuinely think it was just a step above even Telltale games, even kind of previous narrative games of that kind. I thought the character writing was exceptional.
One thing character writing wise that they did that I would never do, that I wonder if helped them, they don't have backstories for a lot of the Z team. And they were basically like, who cares? Because in the context of what happens in the game, where they came from, or like, where is Malevola from? How old is she? They don't know. And I have been taught, both in school and anywhere that I've ever worked, to have their whole backstory written out in a giant short story, basically, and to know exactly every facet of what happens to someone. And sometimes, I'd say, especially working in AAA, that can be very complicated because you're trying to like make every piece fit together meticulously, and if story changes happen, things have to change, whatever. But it made me think, are there some cases where being overly pedantic about that kind of thing can actually negatively impact your audience because you're concerned about making a choice that is more interesting to a player or a reader or whatever, if you're not bogged down by things they will never even know. And I'm like, that's scary to me, but it clearly worked for Dispatch.
I've definitely done that rant on this show before. It's just I'm aggressively anti-lore, or at least like it's a very low priority.
Yeah, I have to map it all out perfectly. Like I really.
Well, to the point where I'm working on a couple of things right now, and with one of them, the story has shifted a few times now, because basically I'll have like my main character, and this really interesting thing happened to them, and that sent them down this path, and now they're doing what? X happened, and now they're doing Y, and then that realization of, well, X is more interesting than Y, so should we do the story? Should we let's tell the story of event X, and then you go, well, but the thing that led to X was A. And I've kind of chased this story almost backwards through this character's arc, just because you're always trying to find what is the most interesting story and narrative to get this character involved in.
Yeah.
So I like that approach. I also, weirdly, I think a big thing that works for Dispatch is sex. Like, they're very mature adult characters in a story. And again, I feel like that's something it's very rare for games to kind of go anywhere near the idea of these are characters who fuck, these are characters who drink, these are characters who party. Like, there's all of this depth to these characters that, again, like, in terms of like games at this scale and scope and acceptability, it's weird to play a game where I know these characters more intimately than I know most video game characters because they're free to explore those kind of more mature themes. I think that was something that just immediately jumped out as like relevant to the story. And I know there's I received some of the criticisms about kind of how sex is represented in the game. I know there's conversations about that, but like the idea of like specifically just talking about characters as if they're grown-ups just felt very grown up, and I liked that.
I have had people getting mad at me for committing sexual assault, and I keep being like, I'm not Malevola. Didn't do that. Wasn't actually there.
Is that all of the kind of her touching Robert a lot?
No, she like slaps his dick.
That's right.
But I keep having to be like, not me though. Did not do that.
Character,
demon
character, who's been expressed to be a villain.
Yes.
Yeah, criminal.
not me. Didn't do that. But people have gotten mad at me for it.
That happens a lot, right? That people kind of will go at an actor for something a character in fiction has done. That seems to still be a thing.
Definitely, but both ways. There are people who I would say like have affection for me now for Malevola, which is totally unearned. So I think it goes in both directions. Yeah, which I get. Like it's hard to separate, but I think sex is a really interesting one in storytelling, in that by the time this is out, because this episode, this is the last one of the year, but we're recording in November, but there's 2 going up in December. I am shooting a film. I wrote a screenplay with a friend, and we got some money together, and from December 1st to 19th, we are making the goddamn movie. And we
That's a hard deadline at the end as well for Christmas. I respect that.
I sure hope so.
Well.
It's gonna be a hell of 3 weeks. But we had conversations about having a sex scene, and I wrote one at one point, which is just to be like, I think we maybe should, which is a very awkward thing to do and then send to your male friend. But I felt like we should, and a lot of that just comes down to people being uncomfortable to share it with their team or talk about it with their team, which like makes sense. But like sometimes, especially like John, who's our director, just didn't want to direct it. And I think that's totally fair. And I was like, do you want me to direct a sex scene? It ended up just being like, no, we'll just imply it. But I do think like that's partly not considered in video games because it feels or looks awkward.
Well, I don't even mean the depiction of it. I mean,
right.
there are
but also just
too,
that people don't want to do it because even bringing it up in a writer's room is uncomfortable.
Or talk about it, or have characters kind of express preferences. It's weird how weird it is. It's weird how rare that is to kind of have that in a game, whereas in movies, like, sex and relationships are a massive part of stories across all films, all books, so yeah.
It's also interesting because I feel like it's kind of always gone down well. Like if you think about The Witcher, like those sex scenes were very popular. I would even think that probably one of the easier ways to garner fandom is including sex. If you think about like Dragon Age.
Yeah, Baldur's Gate's another
Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
It probably is partly that like it inherently introduces vulnerability to characters or makes people feel like they relate to them, like you're saying, more intimately. It is. We as an industry are like, no, we are too good for sex.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
I do like that you put a British accent on for that.
Well, you've got to. That's bloody disgusting.
You've got to. Yeah. I think you're right, though. I think it's embarrassment. Now, I'd not thought about it that way until you said it, but I think you're absolutely right. It's a bunch of game developers don't walk into a room and go, I think this guy fucks.
They don't want to bring it up.
But
then God of War came through.
I think if I had
you
to...
get just a very teenage kind of like old school God of War, let's do a threesome scene or whatever, like, which is very teenage.
I love it.
Yeah.
Minigame.
That's actually what I was just about to say. Is I think it pendulum seems to swing on either, and there's probably a lot of people that are very discomforted, as you're saying, but then there's also this weird juvenile outlet for others, which is because a lot of it, there's plenty of games that have done that in the past where it didn't feel particularly insightful. Like when I think about an example of there's an arc in I think it's season 6 of Buffy where she's basically in the depths of such like self-loathing and self-destruction that she develops a kind of deliberately destructive relationship with one of the villain characters, basically, a vampire named Spike. And there's like a sex scene where they're throwing each other around in a condemned building so that it's sort of collapsing around them as a sort of, thinly veiled metaphor of like, this for her is not, this is an act of willful self-destruction. But it's done as basically a kind of passionate sex scene. But it's one of those where it's like more scenes like this. If you're gonna explore that and make it a thing that it's not just to kind of indulge your teenage repressed fantasies, but actually tell the story in an interesting way using this third rail kind of very sensitive electric kind of topic for 99% of people. I always thought that was a really incredible. Of course, I love everything about Buffy, but
I feel
really,
like I could be misremembering. Probably am. I feel like I felt like
Austin.
Majority of what's your name again? Grant, right? I feel like
terrible. No, I'm not Grant because you can understand the words that come out of my mouth. So
how dare you?
That's right. I'm coming down hard on the Scots.
He's not even here. So what did he do? I feel like most of the sex scenes in early Game of Thrones felt similarly purposeful, even if they were gratuitous. Felt significantly purposeful. They were presenting a point about a character. But I wonder where people find that line, like...
Well, it's different for everyone, I guess.
It must be.
Part of the issue people are trying to dodge, right, is that there will always be... It's because it is so personal and so intimate, like, different people will have very different lines in the sand and all of this stuff, which would be my fear about kind of going in that direction in a project, I think, because, there's lots of ways to interpret any scene you'd give. I remember there was controversy around the arc that Austin's describing in Buffy. I remember there were people who were like, this is genuinely like valorizing that kind of destructive relation, which is obviously not the intention and wouldn't be my read, but there's always going to be that kind of breadth of reactions to this stuff. So I think that's probably also a concern for especially like,
difficult to do right
games.
Well, no, impossible to do right is what I would say. You can't please everybody, but yeah, it's an interesting point. Video games are kind of sexless in a lot of cases outside of games that have dating sim facets. And yeah, I do wonder if part of that is the medium trying to move away from that like God of War sex minigame appearance, and feeling like in order to be art, they can't do that, which is silly. Or just people feel awkward bringing it up. Like you got to talk to a team of 20 people and then talk to an animator about what that looks like. Yeah, I get it. It's kind of awkward.
It would lead to a weird string of emails, I imagine, in most cases.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is, like, that's actually something, I wish Pierre could come back. I'm kind of
interested
in how, I'm interested in how those conversations happen that kind of, I'll ask him next time I see him, because that would have been, because there's a pipeline to, if you're putting together an action sequence, there's 20 people who have to have a decision about that, there's storyboarding, there's thought processes, like, for doing something like a sex scene in Dispatch, like, how are those conversations done? Are there like sensitivity coordinator style conversations where you're like, I want to talk to you about this content, but obviously this is a professional environment. I'm just interested in how you navigate that stuff
professionally. Yeah,
because I certainly wouldn't go to like an employee of mine and be like, okay, so here's what I think is hot, and we should put in this scene. Like that feels wrong in lots of levels.
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah. Also worth noting, there's no actual sex scene in Dispatch, which is the funniest part.
Yes. It's
Ish.
Fantasy scene.
But it's not.
Someone messaged me that they were on a bus when that scene happened, and it was a very awkward moment for them.
The day that we recorded with Pierre was the day that episode came out. That's why he was referring to it as the horny episode, and he was watching people's reactions to it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, what was it like to write and submit that scene to your team? I don't know, but
and to approve storyboards and have conversations about art and choices and
I made sex minigame jokes a lot while I worked at Santa Monica Studio, and I will say people repeatedly batted me down, and I just think that we should acknowledge that the woke agenda has killed video games. I think it's about time.
I think if people take one thing away from this incredibly nuanced conversation, it is
The
that
woke
we feel
agenda
that
is
the
the
wokes have ruined video games. Yeah.
As
Did you
we
ever
always
play,
have, as we always have.
You have a gift of a clickbait title for the episode now.
The woke agenda has ruined game sex in brackets.
Sexless?
Yeah. Question mark in brackets. You should start a YouTube
Did you ever
channel.
play?
It's just all of us going like this.
Did you ever play Luxuria Superbia?
No.
You remember that game? That was, Tale of Tales, the married couple, Mikhail and Aurea, who made games like Endless Forest, and they did a game that was called Luxuria Superbia that was essentially trying to be like a sex simulator, but in very them style. It's extremely kind of abstracted and
was this the one where it was very cartoony?
It's like it's very psychedelic.
Yes, I remember this.
But it's meant to be kind of an erotic. I just remember them giving a micro talk about its design at the GDC at the experimental gameplay workshop session, and I just remember Michael getting up and going, "We did a lot of research for the development of this game as a married couple who makes games together." It was very important to get this right. I can't even really, it's been so long, I don't even really remember how it works mechanically, but it was one of the few that I could ever think of that is explicitly about
when a man
this.
and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or any form of identification love each other very much, Austin.
You want to walk me through the mechanics of that, Mr. British man who famously handles taboo subjects head on? Yeah.
Anyway, sex shame in general is a weird and very prevalent thing. There's
only among people who don't do it well.
Yeah, and one of my favorite authors is Mormon, and
Twilight.
Yeah, no, and it's you can tell in the way that he writes things that everything he says about sex it relates to shame in a way that is I think he's like trying to stop doing, but like definitely like people would be inherently punished for having sex or like many things like that. It's like such an interesting thing that people kind of can't help but explore through fiction sometimes, like their relationship to sex being such a significant thing. And I don't know, maybe that's part of it. It's really complicated. Maybe that's part of why the games industry's like, never mind. Also, what's the mocap for that look like? Let's just not do it.
Did you ever?
That's my question: is all the practicality of all that stuff?
Yeah.
Because in film there are structures in place for that kind of stuff to get filmed. Like I bet games it's a bit more of a Wild West. Sorry, Austin, go for it. Sorry, mate.
Well, I thought of another game that takes it head on. That was the definitive GDC party game 12, 13 years ago. Was by a studio that has since I think closed down, if memory serves. Called Game Oven. That was called Fingal. You remember Fingal?
That's the one I was thinking of earlier.
Fingal?
That's the one I was thinking of.
One of the most genius. One of the most genius.
An important game that more people should play.
It was. I remember they gave a postmortem at GDC where they were like confirmed instances of having sex after having played Fingal as a couple. 37. Number of relationships ended over Fingal. Like they had a whole rundown of, but it was one of those, like, it was truly one of the most, you would,
this is not what I say. It's a co-op.
It's a co-op, like shockingly, it's one of those that's innocent and not at the same time. It's not asking you to do, it's basically Twister with your hands.
Huh.
It's
and just that there's just an inherent like intimacy to it.
Yeah.
There's a certain being good at the game, one could argue, would serve a secondary purpose in a private life as well.
Well, and it also is one of those that if you're not comfortable kind of intertwining your hands with someone, it gets incredibly awkward instantly. So that makes it like,
it's true.
Like someone I remember was walking around at one of the parties at GDC, just with an iPad going, "Hey, you want to try this?" And it was just hysterical because it would immediately lead to someone go, "Oh, okay," and then very quickly they realize what they've just signed up for, and it's kind of like, Oh my! And I found it hilarious.
They were more innocent times.
It was well, because there's nothing
or less innocent depending on how you look at it.
Well, that's the thing. There's nothing actually sort of untoward or anything that would flirt with discussions of consent, or should this be at a bar where people are drinking, or it's far more innocent than anything that conversation could lead to. But it's still also completely unambiguous in its kind of like eroticism, which I thought it was brilliant.
Interesting.
I thought it was absolutely
it's also,
hilarious.
Like you're saying, very innocent, but simultaneously very intimate.
Absolutely.
I mean, so's Twister, right? Twister is the classic example of this. Like, yeah. There's definitely with Twister, there's definitely a point where you play as a kid and then you play as a teenager, and those are very different.
I've not played it since child, so in my head it's entirely innocent, but I understand what you're saying.
Since child.
Yes, I've not played it since child.
Spoken like a proper android.
Thank you.
Yeah,
seamless.
Since
I think honestly, I think
deployment.
placing Alanah with ChatGPT was the smartest move we made, Austin.
That's true. That's true.
I think you're really smart, Mike. It was a really good idea.
Yeah, good.
This is great.
All of your ideas are great.
I knew you'd come around on the Gen AI thing.
Well, you
this
really
is episode
me, Austin.
41,000 releasing this month, by the way, as well. We're really churning them out.
5 years, by the way.
Jeez.
We've been doing this for
we're at 6 years.
More than that.
Started in 2019?
Because we were pre-pandemic. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I was actually scrolling through my phone the other day, and I found our backstage New York Comic Con selfie. That was the Singularity.
That was the John Wick.
Yeah.
Which was that was 2019.
Yeah, the moment I was like, these people are pretty good at talking to each other. We should record that. Yeah. Do you think Troy's still on the train?
Still on the train.
Probably.
I think he might still be on the train.
That's a fair. Circling back to Dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched this YouTube video. I meant to send this to you guys to watch before we...
It's been 6 years, man. We all forget things sometimes.
I know, it's true. I meant to send it to you because I was curious. YouTube randomly recommended, it's a smaller channel called Empathy Machines that is
great name.
Seemingly kind of a new... it's a wonderful shorthand for what games are or can be. But anyway, this was a video about writing. It's like one of these, game design commentary analysis type channels. And anyway, they said that they think that we grade game writing on a curve, and a lot of games that we call good writing are actually crap writing, and that we still haven't collectively kind of figured out the harmonization of mechanics with writing, because so many games, their story is just so blatantly contradicted by then what you turn around and do. And I thought it was one of those funny. But not just that. It was.
I've thought about getting it tattooed on me because I think it's funny. I genuinely thought about getting the phrase ludonarrative dissonance tattooed
on your forehead,
right here.
Have we worked out like a unified theory of good writing in like novels yet? Like, is that an unsolvable problem for games? Like, that we'll always be debating? Isn't that kind of the fun of it? I guess?
What is good writing in general? My immediate response to what you just said, Austin, is defensiveness. And the reason that I feel that way is that I feel like I see so many people throw around all video games have shit writing regularly. This is happening on Blue Sky over the past month.
Which this video does not make that claim at all, for the record.
For sure, yeah. Cool. It didn't imply that. But I feel like I tend to feel like a lot of that comes from a position of... I feel like I probably used to do it. Is people thinking it's more of a reflection of someone's ego than of the writing in a lot of cases? Because I feel like I see a lot of people say it, but not enough people dissect it. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel like we see a lot.
They make
a lot
the
of people,
claim of bad writing, but they don't.
But very rarely actually go out of their way to write an interesting article or make a video like the one that you're talking about. And I feel like we have a huge lack of that, because it's also like, it's complicated. Like I have so many opinions that I've shared on here about what audiences think good writing is and how much you can or can't challenge that. Like if someone doesn't have a defined character arc, so criticism of The Last of Us Part 2 is that Ellie doesn't grow. Therefore, the writing is bad because she does not have enough of a defined character arc, or she doesn't learn. Is that not the point of the game? Is that not what that game is about, that she's repeating herself, and the criticism is that she can't get out of that cycle. Like the idea that it's like bad writing because does not follow writing convention of arc. I just feel like we don't talk about
that's not even
constructive way.
And what you just said isn't even the claim. I've actually had this discussion with Angela on a bunch of occasions.
I'm speaking completely unrelated to your.
No. I know. I'm saying. No, that's not what I meant though. I'm saying what you just described. When someone says this is bad writing because of its failure to adhere to that preconceived structure or whatever, that's not even what it sounds like they're saying. It sounds like people, and I've had this debate, I've had this lively debate on many occasions with Angela, where she'll say that's not good, and I'll go, is it not good, or that you don't like it?
I think The Last of Us Part 2 is such a good study for that, because the way that you don't care about spoilers at this point. Okay, shut up. The way that Joel dies, people will criticize. I know. People will criticize at length, and be like, "Well, you shat on your audience, you pissed off your audience." They needed you to be in that place for you to want to go on that revenge mission. The point is that you're supposed to be extremely angry and feel angry. It's not like it's like acting like it's some tiny little thing that occurred to him. You are supposed to be infuriated by it. It's agreeing with you that it's infuriating so that you will be willing to go on this journey.
The closest argument that I think I'm a big defender of Last of Us 2. I know I'm biased through multiple friendships with, between Neil and Troy and, Laura, and like I have a lot of blind spots, as it were, in my ability to be theoretically objective.
Sure.
But I also have no problem if someone it's not that I'm completely and totally, I'm not a sycophant either. I feel like I can see the issues. The closest issue the closest challenge that I've ever understood kind of where they're coming from, but it's almost more of an interesting human psychology thing than it is about the writing of that game, is the closest I've heard to a kind of steel manning of why that was such a such a bad writing choice for Joel to have died in that way, was because Joel would never fall for that. That was sort of, they said, we spent an entire first game building him up as a character who's savvy and who is not trusting of others, and would just simply never have gotten so easily in a situation like that, especially from what is effectively a bunch of kids. And to them, it was basically like, we need to kill off this beloved character just for the sake of this other game, for, to kind of rile you up, to then serve you a bunch of characters that you don't like as much. And I kind of heartily disagree with that take. I think that the game, first off, establishes quite well that it's years later, and they've settled into something much less subsistence, survival-y in nature. Like,
the
it's
dude's
still
become an artist. Like he didn't do that the first time either. Like I also
it felt plausible. To me,
but also can't be objective because I've heard Troy's perspective on it, and Troy's perspective made so much sense to me, which was half of the point is that he's let his guard down, and that was a mistake, and that he's like become part of this community in this span of time. And like that's it, they go out of their way to show you him being accepted and all of this art that he's making and how he is softened as a person and how that's not acceptable in this environment. And I think
how punishing this world is for
the part of it that I don't know if I heard this from Troy. I made a video about the narrative design in The Last of Us. So it's not about the writing, but it's about the narrative design and like the things that I really respect about it as someone who I do see a variety of issues with that game. But that part of it is, how can Joel, someone who has caused a ton of violence, is extremely violent and has perpetuated violence in this world, how can he go, I'm okay, I think I'm just going to settle down and have my cozy life? He doesn't have the right to do that. The world that he's created is violent. He's created violent repercussions. The impact that he's had on Abby is extremely violent. Like, her whole life is colored by that violence. So it's like, it's part of the story there is that Joel should not be allowed to step away from it, and he thinks he can. He hasn't earned that. The shit he did is far too violent. Violence is going to come back for him. He caused too much pain. And I think that they do a really good job with that too.
These are all very interesting takes, and when someone naturally bristles against that, and that's where I said there's almost an interesting psychological experiment where I became quite fixated and fascinated by how polarizing that game became, and I watched so many reviews, and the more kind of dude bro types that were so angry about it had a tendency to, it seemed like they were really saying, I invested 30 hours of my life playing the first game and building this character up. And it's like a weirdly, or whatever it is, it's like a betrayal of me. It's sort of the idea that it somehow betrays me because I was Joel. And it's like, now it's personal. And I just remember thinking, that's kind of a you problem.
But I think all criticism of media is ultimately an emotional reaction followed up by justification or investigation of that emotional reaction. Yeah. And I think if you're articulate,
can't reason someone out of a position they weren't reasoned into.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're someone who can articulate and you have like a talent or a skill for something, you can come up with better justifications of why it didn't work for you. But ultimately, it's the exact same thing. If me and you, Austin, listen to the score of something and we both don't like it, you will be able to express why you don't like it better than I can. But both of our views are equal. Both of our views are just emotional reactions to a thing, right? An end product. And I think that there's the tendency to kind of want to try and work out why the unified rule that makes me right in my opinion about every piece of media I've ever consumed.
Totally,
I find it very. I don't buy into it. I think there's like the reasons I bounced off of Last of Us 2 are completely unrelated to anything that either of you have said. But I'm sat there going, yeah, I do agree with every criticism that's being said of this. That is a problem, and it's basically just me justifying an opinion I already had formed.
True.
Or a reaction that I'd already formed.
It's funny how that can also work kind of in a almost like I would say in a self-neutralizing way, because it's not working the other direction in a confirmation-y sort of way. But what I mean is, going back to Dispatch, I always think of the process of analyzing or like digesting a movie, a book, anything. There's sort of the two-stage process. There's that immediate feeling, the moment as you're experiencing it or as the credits roll, all that kind of thing, the moment you close the cover, followed by how do you feel a week, a month, a year later, the kind of digestion process. And I've had it go every direction in that, where I loved it the moment the credits rolled, and then the more I thought about it, it fell apart and I ended up hating it, or vice versa. I was so against it, and then it kind of stuck with me and got under my skin, and I found myself going.
I love the vice versa one. That's like I think. I like Last of Us Part 2 more now than I did when playing it, and I like it's a fun journey to go on when you sit with something.
Sometimes a thing it gets its hooks in you, and so I'm still in the digestion phase of Dispatch. But for example, I remember there were a lot of quibbles that I kept thinking about as I was playing it. For example, I didn't love that the core gameplay, the core Dispatch gameplay, seemed to be effectively an unrelated project from the kind of Telltale dialogue tree, aspect of it. There's obviously some areas where they touch each other. There's a couple moments like who you cut and whatever that are actually who you cut is actually not in the Dispatch mode anyway. So it's sort of probably informed by what you do while you're in the Dispatch. But the point is that they touch each other in gentle ways, and you could all but separate them into two different games that are kind of the same IP. And kind of like Hearthstone and WoW are sort of in parallel, but not really the same game. You could do that with this relatively effectively. That would be a quibble. I was also, spoiler, probably the biggest problem that I had was they spent an entire episode fixating on the flambe thing of like him discovering the identity, and there's seemingly zero, unless there's a choice that I just didn't make, which is entirely possible. It seemed like there was zero payoff to what was an entire episode's worth of build-up that I couldn't. I
don't think there is.
It seemed like that was a pretty major
just a great
thread.
Song. That's
which was worth it, really.
But all that aside, the point is like so I'm kind of like logging. There's things about it I'm liking, and I'm also building this kind of log. But then to your point, Mike, about the sort of fundamental irrationality at base of all this, by the time I got to the last episode, I was so invested that I sort of didn't give a shit about any of that, because I just found myself really wanting to see where this ended. And I have to say, as someone who was, despite how weird it made me feel a couple of times because how well I know Laura. I was all in on Invisigal because I'm like an underdog person. I can't resist the kind of unlikely redemption arc stories. And the game really surprised me with the way it sort of did not give me what I wanted in that way. And I liked it even more for that. So I found myself going, okay, I like, in other words, it didn't give me the redemption arc that I was trying to manipulate it into giving me.
Which, fun fact, not that this is your criticism is totally valid. The dispatch gameplay does impact the ending that you get with Invisigal. If you don't use her or you don't succeed with her enough, she is more likely to go in a certain direction. It just doesn't tell you that.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
That's an interesting issue across, not issue, because again, I absolutely.
That's the David Gator card tricks in the dark concept of sometimes when
there's a little bit of that. Dispatch in general, I'd say the one, I don't even think it's a problem, but the thing that I find the most intriguing, from a design and narrative design kind of perspective, is how much it obscures information, just across the board. So within the dispatch minigame, you're guessing at is this gonna be, I know this is gonna have a defensive need, but how much of a defensive need versus you're kind of trying to figure out what the shape of that is.
I love the minigame.
It's really interesting. I love it. It's bold at how little it's willing to tell you and how much it gets away with that. And I think a big part of that, weirdly, is the kind of the bouncing ball kind of
they did human brain correctly. We love seeing a little thing bounce into a place to give us a nice stat.
It makes me forgive it. It makes me forgive it for the guesswork. It doesn't feel, I think if you just did it you have to get over 50% of the area, say, of this box, the fact that it turns into a little gambling machine at the end makes me feel okay with it. But there's lots of stuff like that where, card games in the dark, it feels... There's definitely places where, as a player, I wanted it to tell me more about how it was working, but I think that would have undermined the experience if it had. There's an interesting balancing act going on there. I
think the player investment thing in that game is the strength of Dispatch, right? I think it's why it spawned the community that it has so quickly. Like I said, I don't know about you guys, but I've worked on things people have liked. I've never worked on something that instantly spawned a fandom. I have no doubt Critical Role has an impact on that, but and again, I knew people would like it. I didn't know we would have cosplayers in the first week. It's been...
What do you think's the edge on that? What do you think gets it to that point?
That investment.
Obviously, it's...
I think it is... and I'm trying to think of how they did that, because that seems fairly universal. People have various opinions about the writing across the board. I've seen a whole spectrum of it. Some people hate the writing, but still finished it. And I would love to break down what it is about Dispatch specifically that does make you want to see it through to the end. And I feel like it has to be the relationships. There is conflict between almost everyone. I do think that it's a thing where people are afraid to have conflict between characters a lot of the times in video games because they're worried it'll make someone an asshole. Humans have conflict. I think that they want a certain amount of characters to be likable, and thus the whole team must always agree, and I find that really cheesy. And I think that Dispatch leaning into that, and they get away with it because they're villains, certainly strengthens... You have an opinion on absolutely everybody, and but I would like to sit down and actually think about how everyone is having that reaction. Like you said, Austin, even if you have issues with the writing that you're but I'm definitely going to finish it. Whereas usually if I'm playing a game and I don't like the writing, I bounce off faster than anything else. Dispatch really sucks you in somehow.
I think part of the point of that video that I was mentioning, was that he was one of the points that he, I think, was making was that, or an implicit point at least, I don't know if he actually said this outright, but the idea that sometimes, like in the case of Expedition 33, which he talks about in that video quite a lot, he's more critical of the writing of that game than I am. I fucking love. I like it. It's bordering on a soap opera in a few places, but it also then goes places way more substantive than I thought it was going to go. It really surprised me by the end. It was about a much heavier topic and a much kind of more meaty idea than I ever saw coming.
So the fucking music in that game, Austin. Have you spoken to the composer?
Yeah, of
Fucking
course.
music in
We did a
Expedition
Game Maker
33.
notebook together
Oh my
immediately.
god, it's so good.
We need to embrace our inner Cirque du Soleil as an industry, I think.
Yeah.
It's really, it's one of those. It's very French, but it's also very Japanese. And it like in the JRPG sense of Japanese. It owns all the eccentricities of the genre so beautifully. To me, it's far and away the score of the year. And
I agree.
Lorien,
I can't stop listening to it.
I'm so happy for Lorien.
It's incredible.
He it's his first game. You know, they found him on SoundCloud.
No way. Holy shit.
Yeah, he was the first hire of that studio. This Guillaume, the founder, literally, I think, left Ubisoft and then found Lorien on SoundCloud, said, "Do you want to be part of this thing I'm building?" And then they built the studio from there. He was literally the first. The whole story is amazing. He was a guitar teacher, and
that's insane. He's definitely going to win. I think that's also a really interesting testament to how important music is for shaping a vision. I do think that game has really excellent direction. It's really cohesive, and I think if you have a song in your head, it can really help you put a whole creative world together. Like that's really, really cool.
And the way they I remember, I played it when it first came out, and just was obsessed and loved it so much. Immediately reached out to Lorien to do a Game Maker notebook, and he and I have become friends and are in touch all the time since then. And then, but Angela kind of had to endure me talking about it so much. I said, you know what? I want to play this game a second time at home, and I need you to kind of ride shotgun with me so you can appreciate. And within 30 minutes, I said, can you understand why everyone is talking about the music? I said, it's not that he invented a new genre or something, but I said the game, it's very elegant. I have a million technical quibbles with the music that are not really his fault per se. It's more about how it's implemented from a tech standpoint. It's just rougher than it deserves. It's one of those where I'm like, oh man, just give me like a day to sit in Wise with this game.
Not a thing I ever would have noticed, but I get why you would.
It's just a lot of transitions are pretty brutal, but I
agree with that.
The music is so excellent. But the thing is, it's not just that it's excellent; it's that it has a point of view, and it really owns it unapologetically. Where I said 30 minutes into the game, I said, you don't have to. This game I played for 50 hours the first time I beat it, and I didn't even come close to platinuming it either. I was like, you could easily double that, I think, if you really wanted to go wild with this game. And I said, but yet within 30 minutes, a fraction of that time, you can see why people are losing their mind about the music, because the game has it's kind of like the way Spielberg will go out of his way. It's like he's making a movie just so John Williams has an excuse to go write music. And there's so many scenes and set pieces and sequences that are clearly built with the in mind ahead of time, that the music is going to be crucial to this sequence. And he just knows he has a trusted partner who will come through and deliver what it needs. And this game seemingly is built like that, where the music is so forward in the experience. It's such the tip of the spear in the way that the game hits you. It is going out of its way to give space for the music to be a front end of it. That obviously, had he not delivered, it would have been the most like naked self-immolation of a composer that you could imagine, because it's just so exposed. The game is designed for that. And I said, it's rare that you play a game that you so immediately think, I can't imagine it in another way. I can't imagine a different score in this. I just so rarely. But anyway, I want to circle back to something really quick. Sorry to ramble forever, but there was
that's good.
The idea of obscuring choice and dispatch is, to me, that's so it's endlessly fascinating concept of where narrative and player agency kind of dance with each other. Because when the Tripod Boys, the singers or songwriters with whom I worked on Stray Gods and a bunch of other stuff, the first project we ever did together was this commission with the Melbourne Symphony called This Gaming Life, which was a string of comedy songs, basically. And one of the very last ones that we did, to this day, is one of those, like, it's just a treasured little thing. No one outside of the live audiences at this thing has ever heard this, but it was such a brilliant little bit of songwriting from them that I was thrilled to be part of that. It's called Safety in Numbers. And he basically tells this story. Scott is the one singing that particular one in the lead vocal way. And it's like him telling a story of getting involved in a road rage incident where a guy like literally got out of his car and was coming at him, and he really got kind of rattled by it. And then he came home and he boots up World of Warcraft and the recurring chorus is just those words, safety in numbers, where the idea is like games are comforting environments, not because what makes them distinct from the real world is that nothing random in the way that the real world hits you with random, like in the fullest sense of random. Everything that's sort of random,
causality,
even things that are sort of unexpected are an emergent property of design, which is still, in a sense, non-random. Even if there can be things that are like a game can't truly do something that it's not able to do.
It's fair.
Or it's sort of fair in its unfairness in a sense. Like and he was saying safety in numbers in that it's like the zeros and ones are comforting because I go into this world and I know that nothing bad can happen to me that it wasn't supposed to happen to me on some level. And it's just an amazing song. It's
nothing
so
for no
brilliant.
reason, which is like one of the harder things about being human. It's like, why the fuck?
And
did
life can exactly. You can just one day just suddenly get sick or something, or a loved one just die in a car accident with no rhyme or reason. And he's like, that compared to the underlying sort of safety of gaming. It's this beautiful song because it's funny, but it's also weirdly poignant. And anyway, the reason I bring it up is because I always think about this idea. Ever since we did that song together, I that concept kind of has permanently lived in my head. And so it's interesting because then you go to a game like Dispatch where you go, in real life, we make all these choices that we have no clue the downstream ramifications of. For example, I wanted so badly to get into USC as a 18-year-old freshman in college, and I didn't get into their music program. I got into it generally, but the composition department originally turned me down, so I went to NYU instead. Because I then transferred from NYU to USC as a third-year student, I had to take a class that I would normally have taken as a freshman, but I was taking it 2 years later. And because I was taking it 2 years later, I happened to end up in the same room with somebody who then was the person who introduced me to Genova Chen and is the reason why I met that game company. And everything about my career tumbled out of that. If I had gotten what I wanted at age 18, everything about my life would be fundamentally unrecognizable today. And you have no idea that every little move is setting in motion dominoes that can have years of ramifications. In this case, I happen to actually be able to see the...
Sounds like bad writing, though. Very convenient. Very convenient. It's not... Your character hadn't earned
You could argue that is by
it's just
design.
lazy writing.
The Lord said no. I will
in the Truman Show, that is my life.
Austin.
Point being that when we do that in a game, when you obscure that the thing that you did has actually caused a domino effect that you will never know, like the famous bit in Space Quest 2 where if you let the xenomorph kiss you, it kills you like an hour later in the game, and you had no idea, and you have to literally replay the fucking game from the beginning. And like that tends to enrage us because of that safety in numbers concept, I think, where we need to know the impact of what we do, despite. And is that because we're looking for things that don't remind us of reality? Because it's one of those. I had no idea that Invisigal's performance in the actual Dispatch gameplay impacts those endings. And it doesn't tell me that. And I'm sitting here going, so is that a strength or a weakness? Because it's an itch. I could make the case both directions. It's a fascinating. We had lots of discussions on Stray Gods about this kind of stuff as well, where I said, I wonder if a player makes this choice, it narrows what can happen later, and they will not know that. And is that bad? Like, will they want to have known it? But maybe not. I go back and forth. I think it's a fascinating conundrum of game writing.
I also think it's very interesting, and I think is also, I agree with you. I think that's a very interesting conversation. I also think our need to qualify that kind of thing as good or bad is probably part of what's ended up with me feeling so defensive about most conversations with game writing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we do, as humans, feel the need to do that. We need to put things in boxes and assign something a label. It's virtually impossible not to, right? And I think that compulsion is sometimes what reduces what could otherwise be like very in-depth discussions about, like, even like human nature is kind of what you're talking about here, but because we have to label good or bad and we don't go any further.
Is it Jesse Shell who wrote Book of Lenses? I can't remember what it was, but basically the idea of like appraising games via different lenses rather than trying to come up with any unified rules, just like using ways of thinking. Because for example, like storytelling, I've heard there are people who've expressed that good storytelling is about provoking conversation between other people about that story. So by that lens, the Invisigal thing triggered an interesting conversation between you two that kind of broadened Austin's view of the story he'd experienced, and you shared an interesting fact.
Thus, it was a success.
That's what storytelling is. And it was a successful story because it triggered two human beings to have a conversation about cause and effect, and that's good storytelling. I saw I listened to an interview with James Cameron the other day where he said all stories are love stories, and that sat with me since of like that's an interesting lens. I don't agree with it. It's definitely true of James Cameron movies. I'm not sure if it's true as an overarching, but again, like that's a lens you can think through. I think you're right, Alanah. I think we rush to kind of good or bad, and I'd much rather think through these things as kind of interlocking lenses, and we're all basically emotional animals who will have reactions to things, positive, negative. But I like applying those different analytical frameworks.
I think it's why we go for the boxes, though. I think that we find it comforting. Like IGN.
Well, it might not be comforting. It might just be utilitarian in order to have a conversation. Like we just have to agree on a few basic premises in order to be able to move past this kind of, like this postmodern, why are we alive? Kind of everything just becomes, if you try to drill all the way down to the fundamental assumptions, you very quickly can't progress. You have to lay in a few basic assumption. Like I think, you were about to say something about IGN.
Sorry, I was going to say one of the worst things about being a game reviewer is having to apply a score to 2,000 words. It sucks. Everyone hates doing it. You're like, I don't know, this maybe? And so our reviews editor the whole time I was there, he's recently retired, Dan Stapleton, made the chart that is, and this is the only way it worked, and like I've spoken about this before and people have had criticisms of it, but it's really fucking hard to give a score to something in any way that feels fair. Would say, if I walked up to you on the street, what word would you say? If I said, what do you think of Expedition 33? If you would say masterpiece, it's a 10. If you would say great, it's an 8. If you would say good, it's a 7. I don't remember exactly, but that's how he would like make it easier for us. But audiences also often complain about scores. The data shows that they fucking love them, that they engage with anything that has a score infinitely more because people are like, excellent, I don't have to like stress myself out. It has been qualified. There is a tidy little number. I'm good. I got my information. And I feel like it's like there's so many things here that like this is an insanely pretentious thing to say, but like that it just like you can extrapolate about the human experience. There's 2 great books that I've read in the last 2 years. One of them is Denial of Death, which posits the theory that everything we do, virtually every choice that you make, is about the avoiding the existential dread that is the plague on mankind, that is that we know that we're going to die and that we are impermanent, and that it's
called what is it called, like mortality avoidance theory or something like that,
and that everything you do really is about avoiding death, and like people wanting to have lasting impacts is really just like a survival.
It's successful so far.
Terror management theory.
Terror management theory. It's a really interesting book. And I there's parts of it I don't agree with, but largely think it's correct, and I think it's presents
seemingly self-evident,
right, and presents a really interesting point about how humans are potentially, we don't actually know, but one of the only things on the planet that know that we are going to die. A lot of other species do not realize that. Like my dog doesn't know he's going to die. What's life like when you don't know you're going to die? How different are things? And the other
much
one,
better.
Maybe, like I guess I really don't know.
I don't subscribe to that belief at all. I think in the same way
he's having a great time. So
music is only valuable because of the silence before and after a given piece of music. I think that there's few ways to render life meaningless more effectively than to remove mortality from the equation.
I love to pause a movie and see how far through the movie I am. Right, I want to know how many hours are left in the game. Like, it's
true.
Finite adds value.
Yeah. The other one is Dopamine Nation, which I highly recommend because it made me assess some of my it made me assess some of my habits in a way that I found to like it isn't a self-help book, but it could be. It's basically about how
It's a
addicted
book about
humans
pleasure.
sort of how addicted humans have become to comfort, to resisting any kind of pain, not wanting to feel any negative emotion, and how a lot of addiction, people can be addicted to things in various ways, comes from avoiding any negative feeling. Like you have a slight headache, you're going to take a painkiller. If you are sad, you are going to try and go out and distract yourself. Like how we are hyper avoidant of anything that makes us feel negative in any way. And doing that has given a lot of people an emotional imbalance where if you try to avoid feeling negative feelings at any point in time, you are less capable. And this is written by a psychologist who studied this for several years and has like many, there are many pieces where she talks about patients that she was helping who had various kinds of addiction. It's really interesting. That if you avoid negative at all times, you can't really feel true happiness anymore. And one of the things that she mentions is not quite like this, but this is the way that I think of it, is if you look at a sunset and you can't have the feeling of, wow, that's beautiful, you're probably depressed. Like if you are incapable of seeing something simple that you've seen a million times a day, but still can't recognize the beauty of that particular thing, especially in the fact that it's unique every morning, you probably have a dopamine imbalance. You should be able to see a bird and feel some level of happiness. You know what I mean? It's both of those books are very, very interesting, and hilariously, I'm combining them to make the point that people just really like putting a number on a game review because it simplifies everything. Yeah. It's comforting. You don't have to think that hard, and it also like gives you like just a permanent understanding of something. Like you're just like, okay, I get it. Here is my a contribution to my opinion on this thing. I'm going to argue with this person so that I feel permanent, so that I feel like my voice matters, so I don't have to deal with the fact that I'm dying. Like it's again, I've really blown up game reviews to matter a lot more than they are, but I think it shapes how we interact with virtually all media. They both. I've just been doing a thing where I read a fiction book and then a non-fiction book, and I think those two really change the way that I view about people who are cruel. Is probably what it is. Is that I look at cruelty now under a slightly different lens of this shared anguish that none of us are willing to acknowledge ever, which is that we're going to die one day.
The avoidance of, or the obsessive chasing of all things pleasure or comfort or is a topic I think about a lot. It's like, it seems like we've definitely migrated a long way from 50 years ago when JFK said, let's do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And the idea of enduring hardship deliberately, as a like when I was growing up, that was taken at face value as, it's a laudable thing to kind of stare down the adversities and the obstacles and to defeat them. And it seems like that's increasingly not the goal.
The AI conversations certainly, like people are like, but it'll be easier. What if I like the hard parts? Why be alive?
It
also raised a generation to expect everything immediately.
Right.
I think that's going to have massive. I think you can trace this back to social media. Yeah. You can, I think it's.
I was recently, I convinced Angela I wanted to watch Next Generation with her, but I said, let me curate the best of the best of the best episodes, because
there's
throwing in the best of both worlds. We're starting there. Measure amount.
Did you write it down? I would love to see whatever this list looks like.
Oh, I made a spreadsheet that.
Can I have it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There are like 20 canonical TNG episodes.
No, I got it to 70. There's 180.
That's actually higher than I'd expect.
There's 180 total episodes. I think, give or take, or 181 or something like that. And then I went through, I read every single episode description. I've seen them all a couple of times. Like I've done a complete watch through at least twice, but I was like, let me go through read the descriptions, you can like IMDb sort by user ratings and see what are the highest rated by users in a given season. And my goal was a minimum of 50% of the episodes can't make the cut. I need to have a sufficiently high standard that minimum 50% won't make the cut, so that it should start to get pretty contentious and like, oh man, but I gotta cut what, and it definitely got there. And I felt really good, so that of the 70 that remained, like I would say 90% or 95% I stand by. I did allow for a couple where I put them in slightly in violation of the rule because they were laying a foundation for something later.
This was my question, is do you put in like the bad Alexander introducing episodes? Do you do those kind of...
It's funny that you mentioned, because this is what made me think of it just now, is
we've lost 90% of the audience at this point. Carry on.
Or we
can't. Because you've got to lay the groundwork for X to get to Y.
There's definitely a few. There was one episode that we ended up not watching. I added it to the list after we'd already, because we went through them chronologically, but obviously we're skipping, a lot as we go. The also, as a sort of axiomatic, all Q episodes had to be included, because to me, like, not all of them are equally great, but given his centrality to the bookending of the series, and for me, Next Gen is one of those shows where my single favorite episode is the finale. I think it has the perfect ending to a show. It's right there with like Breaking Bad, where you go, they just couldn't have ended it more perfectly. And so in any case,
all good things.
Truly, Alexander is the reason I thought of this just now, is because there's an episode where Worf has to figure out what to do, what his role as a parent is, and how he keeps trying to pawn off Alexander onto Troy and onto the school and his parents back on Earth. And and then at the episode, and Alexander starts acting out and getting into trouble, and it like almost kills him. There's a thing where there's a power outage or whatever on the Enterprise, and Alexander's not where he's supposed to be in that moment, and it caused a thing where he's literally almost dies because of his disobedience, which is actually him acting out of feeling unloved by his father. And at the very end of the episode, Worf goes, you have a choice. You can go be at this, Klingon school surrounded by people, because like also students were making fun of him. He was the only Klingon amongst humans, blah, blah, blah. So he's like, you can have a sort of, you can have an easier life. You can go there. Or, and he's like, the way he said it's amazing. Michael Dorn fucking crushes it.
I was gonna say, it's such good shit, because he's also processing all his childhood trauma through this.
It's so, everything about it is great.
He was so much better.
It's a brilliant show, dude. I love it.
It's at its best.
I haven't watched any of the episodes in ages. Yeah, it
watch this.
It was my introduction to philosophy as a child. Like, it really was, and I was like, damn, this is really making me think about the world.
I dropped my list in there for you. But so the end of the episode, he leans in and he goes, "You can have all that, or you can choose the harder path and stay with me, because I don't know what I'm doing as a parent, but we can figure it out together and we can rise to the challenge together." And it's one of those where and of course the son's like, yeah, that. And it's one of those where he presents the harder option, the one that they know they both are ill-equipped for, as the exciting one. And I turned to Anila and I said, name me any recent show that has that as its conclusive statement, where we go, we kind of suck at this, but let's do it. Let's try. Let's go for the harder. And I said, man,
especially in one episode.
Yeah, it's so, I just one of those that really has stuck with me. It's one of those where I see a lot of this. I'm going to read this book. I just pulled it up on Amazon. I hadn't heard of it. The Dopamine Nation.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
It feels right up my alley, because I find myself increasingly going, I have no interest in easy things. I'm getting
totally.
I'm almost developing a complex about it, because I'm so surrounded by people shirking, like, like I saw a friend of mine was having a conversation the other day, was talking about that we talk a lot about rights, like in America. There's a lot of, there's discussions around, if you want to get political philosophy of positive rights versus negative rights, things that you're entitled to versus things that you are are you are guaranteed to not negative rights would be things that cannot be done to you versus like your free speech shall not be infringed. That's a negative right. It's not a positive right which grants you something. It's basically saying nothing can take this away, and the Constitution is sort of fundamentally a document built around negative rights. It is theoretically, it starts with the axiom, all things are permitted. Now we will enumerate those things which the government can take away from you, but hypothetically, in fact, there was an interesting debate when they were writing the Constitution about not wanting to even include a Bill of Rights, because they said it creates the implication that we have to list things like free speech. It should be that all things are permitted and only that which is not is written out. And if we start saying things that are permitted, it creates the opposite intent of what we're trying to communicate. They decided
it was such a revolutionary perspective.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's one of those.
Insane.
It's
an incredible achievement.
It's a pretty brilliant bit of political insight and sort of liberal insight. But in any case, all that aside, the this friend of mine was talking about we talk a lot about rights, but and say, you know, there should be a right to this, a right to that, or right to be free from this and that. And all of those are very interesting conversations. But he said what so frequently gets lost in that is that implicit in most rights is a corollary responsibility. And that there are like, for example, if I have a right to not be murdered, I have an equal responsibility to not murder. Like, that is understood as a basic bit of framework and logic, right? It's one of those.
And you're doing great at that. You're doing
so far so good. You know,
you you really don't.
A couple of near misses, but so far doing all right. And so anyway, it's one of those where I find myself thinking about that a lot lately. Of going, I think, because in a way we're sort of victims of our own luxury in so many ways that we forget about all the ways we can or should be sort of stepping up in service and thinking about the responsibility side of it a lot more. It's just, anyway, it's a topic that I find myself thinking about in my idle thoughts kind of daily, sort of in a very fixated way. And it's why I found myself so inspired watching an episode of Star Trek where his final thing is, I have a responsibility to you as a parent, and it's much harder. And let's tackle this together. And I just found myself going, man, I would never expected this to be one that has stuck with me more. Of all the episodes, it just shows you where you are at different points in your life. The different things will speak to you in different ways.
Yeah,
there's also something great.
I was just gonna say, like, again, I'm being reductive, but that like I was touching on earlier, this is strongly how I feel about these AI conversations where people have been like, but wouldn't you prefer if an AI could get rid of that difficult job of writing gameplay box? No. I want the difficult job. How do you grow it? Not that gameplay box are hard, but whatever. The tedious job, perhaps. How do you appreciate the parts of it that you do enjoy if you don't have the parts of it that you don't enjoy? And like this idea that, well, it'll make voice actors don't have to go in the booth if you can sign off their voices, and they fucking like voice acting. Like, even when it's very difficult, those are some of the most rewarding things you can do as a human. And it's crazy to me, like, they figured this out in ancient China. Taoism, effectively, like, their whole driving force behind the principles of Taoism are to feel everything. To just make sure that you feel everything and that you are whole in feeling it. That if you don't like something, that you sit in that feeling and that it gives your life more color. And I'm like, man, we really already figured that out, and then just like moved away from it for a fucking infinite scroll on social media because our brain goes, yay, people like me. Like, they had it all spelled out. We should have just listened. But I know it's the thing that bothers me about the way about people talk about AI. I like the hard job.
That's what's wonderful. That's what's amazing about humanity is we've always had a lot of the answers going back thousands of years, and we've always pulled away from them. There's amazing. I find there's a comfort in this, and this is true of Star Trek Next Generation, which obviously was written and made decades ago, and they were dealing with the exact same kind of philosophical questions as we have now. But it's been true since forever. There's that Plato thing about kids today, which could have been written today about people on smartphones. Like, those from all of eternity, humans at around our ages have had the exact same neuroses and fears and
Denial of
answers
death,
and
Mike.
challenges that we have, and it's wonderful.
I also think
love
our
it.
rejection of principles, like the reason we're not all following Taoism, is also part of that denial of death. But I must have my own reasons that I have
maybe
found
I'm gonna
myself.
work it out.
Exactly. Because I am important and thus infinite. Like, we're so defined by these two things. It's crazy. Anyway.
But Alanah, what if I'm right? What if I am the one who's worked out?
If that makes you feel better, that's what it's really all about. Is you thinking you might be right.
Yet. I've not died yet.
Austin, back to this YouTube channel that spoke about good and bad game writing.
Yes. I give this conversation a 5.
Out of...
We never got what you were going to say there because I told you that I felt offensive about it. I don't remember even the context in which you brought it up at this point an hour ago.
Well, he was talking. His general thesis was that most games are not as well written as we think they are.
Yes,
and
by what logic?
We grade on a curve. Well, he basically says that a variety of factors, but not least of which the dance with gameplay. Games don't handle subtext as well as he keeps using an example of Pulp Fiction where he's like, in 5 lines we learn so much about these characters that we have so much less screen time with them. He goes, he like I said, he's harder on Expedition 33 than I am. I love it. I find it near flawless.
Congratulations on winning all those awards, by the way, because this will be up after the Game Awards. Huge congrats, Expedition 33.
Undoubtedly, yes. It's
a shame about what happened at the Game Awards, though. I thought that was a real shame.
I can't believe just did that.
Insert
Crazy.
controversy. You just need to have like a screenshot show up of some headline.
Yeah. We knew
in this moment,
and
we're like,
we knew that. I mean, obviously that was going to happen. It's an inevitable
disgusting.
outcome of the event. Yeah.
But yeah, I think he was saying that he felt like, for example, he knew less about the characters after an hour of playing than in a single scene of Pulp Fiction, and he was saying games have reached a point where there's no reason for. He goes, he talks about grading on a curve because he goes, there are brilliantly written games. Actually, he really caught me by surprise because he cited the Banner Saga as one of his favorite written games, which was I was like, whoa! I sent it immediately to Arnie, and was like, hey, check this out. I didn't tell him why I was sending it, and he was like, oh, this is a pretty cool video. And then like 15 minutes later, when that happens, he goes, oh, what the fuck? Which was nice, and I do love the writing in that game. But Alex Thomas was the writer, for the record. And so anyway, I think his point was, he said games like to walk the walk of sort of being in the big leagues, but actually we give most of them an easier pass. We're harder on films, and we call bad writing in films out more readily than we do in games. We kind of uplift games. That was his central thesis. And I remember thinking there are a lot of games where their challenge is non-trivial. Like I think like how you allow for player choice. You know, like look at a game like Baldur's Gate 3, which has 100 trillion lines of dialogue that have to all work together in order to, and story threads and all kinds of things in order to allow for crazy amounts of player choice. And if you were to take a little sampling of 10 minutes of it and throw it up against, the pick your favorite written film, whatever, Schindler's List or Eternal Sunshine or whatever, or whatever. From a writing standpoint, I'm saying like take your favorite.
Schindler's List is really actually genuinely and sincerely my favorite movie. I fucking love Schindler's List.
Wow,
it genuinely is.
All right, that's okay. Fair enough, man. Yeah.
Take whatever to you constitutes perfect writing. For me, perfect writing is Castaway and Ratatouille. I think you whatever it is. He's like, if you were to extract 15 minutes from Baldur's Gate 3, or like for me, like Mass Effect, you can see, well, it's probably hard to see, but I have my little Normandy right there. Everyone knows I will defend Mass Effect to the death.
Of course.
But like, there is also, it's sort of undeniable that if you take 10 minutes of Pulp Fiction and take 10 minutes from that and put them side by side and you try to evaluate them in as apples to apples away, it usually will come out pretty unfavorably for the game because it's actually not apples to apples.
Well, yeah, I was going to say
because the gameplay is so crucial.
Exactly, I would say, well, doing that comparison is dumb.
It's a flawed comparison without a doubt. And I
walking
don't...
through Venice, I thought it looked much less pretty than the painting I looked at in the Louvre once. Like,
I think,
I think
film and
there is something in there though. I was just gonna. I'll shut up. I'm talking way too much. But there is always something in there. There is something. Like I do think that one of the takeaways that I liked about what his point was let's not stop aspiring to narrow that gap as much as possible, even in recognizing that the gap might itself be a flawed observation.
Okay.
But just the idea that periodic games are just like these leaps forward where you go, oh wow, that was right. I remember the first time I played BioShock, I was like, this is such more adult writing than like any game that I had played ever at that point, where I just remember going, this is wrestling with crazy. The fact that one of the architects of all the horrors in Rapture was like a Holocaust survivor, and it was like, that's one of those where I just remember going, wow, okay, this is a whole other level of challenging ideas and interesting concepts. And most games were like,
Ayn Rand.
Go there. Well, yeah, Ken said, what if someone were to run this experiment and say, what if you were to create a society built on all these pillars? What are the best and worst aspects of it that would come true?
BioShock does explore the Fountainhead. Like it explores that concept, certainly. I'm just glad it explores it negatively.
Well, I don't think it's one-sided. I think that's the brilliance of it. I remember once he said to me, I don't make art. He goes, I make art. I create because I want to ask questions I don't know the answer to. If you're positing the answer, it's propaganda. And if you are exploring a thing where you go, I don't know, like, let's explore, put all of it on the table and see what the takeaway is.
Fair. I mean, Rapture fell apart, but I get.
I disagree with that perspective, but we haven't got time. I could not agree less with that view. But yeah.
Well, I want to return to it then sometime, because I do agree with that.
I think I like both. I think I like things that ask questions and things that posit perspectives. I think I like both.
I think it's a dishonest. To summarize my position, I think it's dishonest to pretend that you can genuinely present something and not have an opinion on it. I think the idea of like, I'm just asking questions is never true.
I don't think that's what I don't think that's what he. I don't want to speak for him.
You want to ask him?
Yeah, it's going to be on. I'll argue with him.
He would be great.
Think what he was saying. I think he was saying that there's a sun.
Good writings when there's rectangles. That's what I say.
There's a difference between his opinion and the work's opinion. Is fundamental. The work is asking a question. He may go, I think that Ayn Rand was.
It's impossible to ask a question without having a perspective in life. I don't think you can say, does my ass look big in this? Is a question where there is definitely some perspective leaning into the question. Like, I think the act of saying anything presents an opinion. I think BioShock definitely has views on libertarianism and on the Fountainhead and all of the stuff it's talking about. Like, 100% there's perspectives. And
I agree, it has perspectives. Yeah, it doesn't feel perspectivist to me.
But it's not. It's not. I don't think that the idea is to say, this is the correct moral conclusion, dear audience member, from the work. That's the point I think he was making, is that if you are saying,
he's not overly aggressive about the point, which renders it not propaganda, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if you're basically saying, here's
how could anyone
my
take
statement.
BioShock in any way other than the way that everybody takes it, though?
Well, I think that it maybe they don't, but I think that it's by virtue of exploring complicated ideas where every time you peel back a layer you go, oh well, that does make sense behind this. Like the idea that the outcasts of society and the disaffected and the traumatized and the marginalized would create something in an attempt to escape that becomes this horrible twisted monster of a society is there may be opinions on that, but that I don't think that it's sort of moralizing about those people.
I
It's-
agree. It's not ranting at you.
Saying
Yeah.
is, yeah, the flip side is, what's the quote about satire? That satire must work very hard not to accidentally become
Parody?
No,
I know what
if
you're
you're
talking about.
satirizing something, you must do it very well, because otherwise you're just going to recreate the thing you're satirizing, essentially. And it's the argument of people who don't get Starship Troopers, right? The people who go, Starship Troopers is a great story about some cool guys who killed
We had that
dogs."
problem at Funhouse.
Like,
Funhouse was often making a lot of jokes where they would satirize like shitty right wingers and often make a lot of sexist jokes towards me and Elise that we were both completely fine with, until realizing that portions of the audience didn't get that they were joking.
but that supports Ken Levine's point, right?
Yeah.
Like of what Austin's presenting, like that bad satire is effectively failing in its propaganda,
Yeah.
right? It's a bad satire is not successfully communicating the
doing the
ideology
opposite.
it's trying to
Yeah.
present, which it's kind of what I'm saying is kind of the dark mirror to what you're saying, Austin. Like that, clearly it is possible to fuck up having an opinion in a work of art because people can misunderstand art. So therefore, it must be possible for the idea of embracing that with intention and going, well, I'm trying to leave this conversation more open and not make a statement, therefore makes sense. So,
Yeah.
Basically, there's shades of grey, and I may be walking back my position a little bit.
Ken,
I'm not wrong.
I do feel like
I'm not
Ken.
wrong.
I
I might
do
be wrong.
appreciate.
I might not be fully right.
No, but that's the nuance. I do think Ken is very unique in his approach to video games in that particular regard. I'm not going to say nobody else does that, but there certainly are a lot of video game stories that have to be black and white, and to go back to the original point of the 10 minutes of the game and the 10 minutes of the film, I think they're incomparable because the writing is functionally different. You know what I mean? Like a video game, you have to write it in order to motivate a player. A film does not have to do that. A film can present really any character or thesis that it wants, and it doesn't have the technical challenge of having somebody on board and having them understand their objective. So it's like...
Games are co-written, right?
Yeah,
Always.
it's such a different medium that I don't know that we could really get closer to that 10 minutes without losing the interactive portion.
Well, that's what's interesting is the games that do, like The Last of Us, that then becomes the criticism that
it
player
takes the
agency
agency
is
away from you.
non-existent,
Yeah.
you know?
To come full circle, I would say Dispatch. I don't know why I put the emphasis on the wrong syllables there, but whatever. Dispatch does Tarantino-esque character introductions better than any game I've played recently. Like, because it's non-interactive in those moments where it's doing those interactions. Like, Dispatch definitely introduces a character really well in 5 lines of dialogue. Like, you get someone quickly. Maybe that's one of the reasons those stories are connected. By sacrificing interactivity.
My super zoomed out kind of summary, I guess, of what I would say is that something that excites me, one of the reasons I just perpetually love working in games and why I love playing games is people probably said a lot of the same complaint, when movies became a thing and the primary storytelling vehicle prior to that would have been theater or novels, things like that. And particularly novels relative to film, where, the standard line was always, when an adaptation would get made, the book was better. And it was better on the basis that inner monologuing of characters fleshes out who they are, the description of who they are, how they moved, the look of the spaceship or the landscape or whatever was always better in my head than any film could ever do justice to. And I feel like we hear less of that, but when I was a kid, it was just no adaptation was ever as good, bar none. It was just, that was always, anytime a movie would come out, the book is better, but this movie's not bad. And I was always like, Jurassic Park, pretty good, but the book, holy shit. That was always the line. And I think because it's the same apples to oranges thing where you're going, a book offers a fundamentally different experience than a film. And so to evaluate them apples to apples is crude at best, and for the same reason. And I don't think anybody goes, therefore, if I love this book or I love novels, films are categorically badly written. I don't think any sane person could make that argument. And so hopefully that's the same. That's why I say my zoomed out perspective is that we're still kind of relatively in the infancy of learning how to write great games. And that 50 years from now, we'll be going, we've learned a lot in that time about how to kind of, in a sense, narrow that gap, but mostly because we just learned how to make games more compellingly.
Well, in our career, in our lifetime, like BioShock was undeniably a really important. All the things you said about it earlier were undeniably true. It's a massive deal. But you look at BioShock now, and you can tell we've moved on. Like, there is travel has taken place since then.
Oh, even by the time of Infinite, a lot of the things that it was criticized for.
Exactly. There you go. Same team.
Yeah,
true. I guess my super zoomed out view similarly would be...
They are wrong about Jurassic Park, though. Before we move on, Spielberg did improve Jurassic Park.
It's a great film.
I love them both. I read the book multiple times.
I love them both, but Spielberg did a lot of heavy lifting to get that story into an emotionally satisfying place. Please continue.
I was going to say, my super zoomed out view is not that I think all games are well written. We have many issues. There are many, many flaws. It is, I would posit, harder to write a video game well, especially AAA, than it is to write a good film. But I guess we'll see how that fares when you all see the film that I co-wrote. It'll be great. But my take is thus.
No sex scene, though.
No sex scene. It didn't make it. I did write one. Maybe I'll release it someday. It was daunting. Anyway.
Is this Alanah OnlyFans confirmed? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, but it's just me writing fanfic of my own film.
Honestly, probably would do fine.
Which then me and Austin act out for you. That's the jump
Yeah, we
scare.
need HR for this podcast. My thesis is thus: I hope that we never find that level of homogeny in video games, and that I hope that we don't get any closer to that 10 minutes across the board. And I hope that people keep making things that are vastly different, because I think it's one of the coolest things about our medium. Is that we can have a video game like The Last of Us that has a very strong take and a very strong opinion, but then we can have games that absolutely do not do that. We could have horses, like the variety of the way stories are told in video games and the feelings that they tap into is the one of the strengths of the medium. And I hope we stay as diverse as possible in the storytelling regard and as creative as possible, because we do not have the inherent limits that filmmaking has.
My agreement with that comes in the form of, I just yesterday played a game called Despilote that is
I think I've heard of that.
I got a code as part of my dice. I'm on the dice jury, and we get codes to play a bunch of games, and I'm always working my way through them. And it's a game that is set in Ecuador in 2002 during the World Cup, and it is a game where you're playing as a little kid who's kind of like obsessed with soccer because the entire country is fixated on Ecuador having a fighting chance for the first time ever in the World Cup. But while simultaneously they're having like massive sort of government meltdown and currency, like hyperinflation, where currency is worth 1,000th of what it's, was in recent, like they're in their kind of economic spiral. And sort of the dual world of everyone really, really, all their conversations are about soccer, or like, oh my God, our country is ripping apart at the seams, told through this child perspective, where most of that narrative is basically just, as you run past adults, you hear what they're talking about.
That's awesome.
And so it's like this
You
very
can't
kind of
do that in a
impressionistic
film, I don't think.
That's the thing. It's one of those games where I was talking about it with a friend, where I said, this is a quintessential example of a game. It's my favorite kind of game, honestly, where it's a game like Her Story. It's a game like Inside, where you go, zero other media could even tell this story. And I love those kinds of games. Like, I love The Last of Us, and I love, I love Mass Effect and these games that, aspire to the so-called cinematic and whatnot. But if I had to like put a game on the Voyager probe to represent the medium itself, it's going to be games that do what only a game could do. It's like in the way that a haiku is so specific to itself that it only it does what it does.
Yeah.
And if you want to appreciate that, you go to that. To me, these kinds of games, to your point, I hope that if anything, what you wished for is more true all the time, especially as the tools democratize and engines and whatnot become more within reach of people around the world. Here you have someone describing their childhood growing up in Ecuador, basically, through a type of gameplay experience. And the game it's simple in its way, and it's not going to be for everyone. And it has a kind of, it has a very aggressive aesthetic choice that it makes. But it's just doing a thing that's not like other games. And I think we just see more and more of that all the time. And I freaking love it.
Yeah, I prefer the creativity than that we find some convention that qualifies good writing, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Keep making weird shit is my thesis. Yeah. And on that note, great episode, you guys. Almost 2 hours. Wow, look at us go.